Not since the Kennedy assassination has there been such a cover-up involving child slavery, drugs, and murder. "16 people are disappeared or dead in what began as the Nebraska legislature's investigation of the Franklin Credit Union." CIA money laundering mixed with North American Man-Boy Love Association, NAMBLA money, child prostitution, child slavery, Satanism mingled with major political figures, both state and federal. President George Bush mentioned repeatedly attending parties given by Larry King, head of the Franklin Credit Union. King furnished drugs and children. Former Governor Senator Bob Keary looked the other way while FBI and others used threats to silence state Republican Senators Lauren Schmidt and John DeCamp. Defying judicial gag order and murder threats, Senator John DeCamp has published a book on the Franklin Credit Union cover-up. This is part of the story.
It was a panel discussion on Satanism and pedophilia, a tough topic on Michelson in the Morning. Information from a panelist divulged key facts regarding the 1982 kidnapping of paperboy Johnny Gosch. Information Noreen Gosch says her investigators have been secretly working on. Author John Zielinski says it involves an informant close to the case.
He has identified him as Johnny Gosch and said, "I saw him over the years as I traveled the country." He might have accompanied the man who kidnapped Johnny Gosch when he was only about 13 or 14 years old.
The existence of the informant has been known to Noreen Gosch for months. She says he's confirming suspicions that she has had for years.
I have known for a long time who's been responsible for my son's kidnapping, and that's been hard to live with. It's something that takes a great deal of restraint to not act upon it, but I've always believed it'll be solved, and we're getting it. It's coming.
And Noreen Gosch says the police believe her. Called into the case, Omaha private eye Roy Stevens, the man credited with breaking the Jill Cutshall kidnapping. Noreen Gosch says Stevens is close to handing who's responsible over to the police. Yet she fears the spilling of the beans about these developments on the airwaves today could backfire.
There's so much that could affect this family yet. We're dealing with some hardball criminals here. And there's just an awful lot that could happen. And
get out of the fucking newsroom. All right? Do I have to cover up your fucking camera? Get out of the newsroom. You do not have my permission to be here. Just get the hell out.
Here to deliver.
I have nothing to say to you at all about anything on any topic ever. So get the fuck out of the newsroom right now.
I'm waiting for the person from the...
Why don't you wait outside, buddy? Go on, out. Out.
I have not found one newspaper man, not one journalist in this state, not the Cedar Rapids Gazette, not the Des Moines Register, not the Quad City Times, not the Dubuque Telegraph Herald, all of which have run stories on me. Not one of them willing to pick up the telephone and make one single telephone call to begin verifying the truth of what I'm saying. I have been dismissed out of hand. Bill Casey, publisher of the Daily Iowan, is so incensed by my very appearance that he goes absolutely stark raving mad.
Camp security, you can turn that off right now.
Now.
Call camp security, now. You're going on, out of here.
Mister,
No,
what reason
you have no right in here videotaping.
What reason do you have to kick me out when I'm only seeking to give you...
Most people do not come in here with cameras. There's a court injunction against you, John Zielinski, for giving this information. That's what the court told me. Now get out of this building. The cops are going to be here in 30 seconds.
It is not the information that I am trying to give you now. It has nothing to do...
I don't want to talk to you. You've been a pain in my ass for 4 or 5 years. I don't want you in here.
I'm saying...
You have no... You turn that off or I'm going to punch you.
I want to ask you this. Do you, in effect, this is what I found out. I went into the Daily Iowan to give them this tape. Now, this
You harassed her. Turn it off, I said. You're going to get...
This is a public building.
Yes, but this is not public space.
I'm not in that building.
I'm in the
We're
hallway.
not in, that's
All right.
your space.
The cops will be here in a minute.
Okay.
Now we can...
We'll go up.
You know this guy?
We'll go up and talk.
You know he's crazy?
We'll go up.
You're acting crazy.
Okay. I'm threatening him because this guy's threatened us for 5 years. You have no right in our newsroom.
What have I threatened? I have.
Hey, you have libeled me. Hey, listen, buddy.
If I have libeled you, then I suggest
You have no money. Your lawyer told me you have not a cent in the world. Don't bother suing you.
Okay, let's go.
Go out.
Now, why is it that a man of your supposed stature...
I do the same thing that Jim Leach's office does. Everybody in the state. You have no business talking to you. You have no right in our buildings. You're crazy.
You saying that newspapers have no business listening to anything I have to say?
Hey, when you come here, you talk to us for 3 hours. As soon as we disagree with you, you start calling us motherfucker and every other word in the world. You're the craziest guy.
You have never heard the word motherfucker or anything like that from me. I do not use the kind of language you use.
That's not your land, and you know
Now,
it. I don't have to argue with you. Would you leave?
Now, I want to say one thing. Would you just...
Here, want to listen to that?
No.
Then why don't you put it in my face?
You want to listen to that?
Yeah, give it to me, I'll listen to it. But I don't want to have to sit here and listen to you.
Okay, that's fine. That's
I'll mail
fine.
this back to you. You have your address? You got a card to give me?
This goes along with it.
All right.
Now, this does not come from me.
Did you turn it off?
And I have confirmed with Senator Loren Schmidt of the Nebraska legislature the truth of this matter that I give you. I now have been talking to John and Noreen Gosh, and I will be taping John and Noreen Gosh about the kidnapping of children and about its association with Iowa.
All right. We will listen to this and we'll send it back to you.
All right. And you will send a letter saying that you have listened to it and send it back. And yet, what have I said of Bill Casey? That Bill Casey has acted inappropriately, that he has acted irresponsibly. I have not called him names, I have not made threats. And yet you would think I was threatening to do something horrible to him. Yet all I said is, Bill, will you give me a few minutes of your time? Will you look at this material? Will you make a phone call? Not Bill Casey. I'm a journalist of 30 years experience, an author and publisher in the state of Iowa for the last 20 years. And I've sought to open a dialogue with the legislators about what's going on in this state. I have identified the person who's involved in a nationwide child kidnap ring, Eddie Tree Collier. Eddie Tree Collier is living right now with the former head of the Civil Rights Organization in Iowa. I have begun to do a series of videotapes interviewing John and Noreen Gosh, interviewing victims of child abuse and so on. Right now, I'm trying to set up a meeting with Republican Senator Loren Schmidt of Nebraska, head of the Franklin Committee, but there have been so many assassinations in Nebraska connected with this child pedophile ring that I have not yet been able to meet with him. I was scheduled to meet with him last Tuesday. I was, in lieu of that, given a tour of the underbelly of Des Moines and introduced to cocaine and crack houses and heroin houses and told that these places couldn't be touched because they were owned by people who were too important to be taken down. Now, Eddie Tree Collier is a convicted murderer. He's a child pornographer. He's been arrested again and again, and he operates openly in Des Moines. I saw open drug buys in Des Moines. I videotaped open drug buys. I went to Senator Barnes with information that I handed to him. And I said, are you going to do something about this? Mr. Barnes laughed and tossed the information aside, saying, I have read all your information. Well, I have a 12-part series coming up on cable access and available on half-inch VHS cassette. And I hope to have a great cross-section of law enforcement and others involved in this. Now, these I have a question. My question is, when are these senators and representatives going to be willing to dialogue with me and others about the rottenness in this state, the corruption that is legal, judicial, political, drug, child pornography? That's the question. I'll wait. Will I get an answer?
Well, my answer is, I'm not in charge of law enforcement. I am sure that there, no, let me finish.
just want to say that law enforcement are out there telling me that they're not getting any cooperation, and I'm putting this down on tape and you'll be able to hear it. Now, you're invited to dialogue with me, and any of you, anytime, for the videos I'm already making.
Would you interrupt me? I will not finish.
I guess the dialogue with quite a few people, and I don't believe that any dialogue I've had with Mr. Zielinski is sort of Mr. Zielinski explaining his situation and never listening to the answers I gave. So that wasn't a question, John.
I listened, and I have Noreen talking about the same situation. Now, you want to answer Noreen and John Gosh?
No, you asked me if I dialogue. I said I have, and I've answered the question. I don't believe there's any more to say on that situation.
I think there's a hell of a lot more to say.
I did glance over your material. I didn't laugh and toss it away. I saw a large Nazi swastika on the material, and I normally, when I see a swastika on something that's handed, I don't
laughing and throwing it away.
I don't usually read on when I get handed something with what looks like Nazi propaganda on it. So it's just a little principle I developed over the years. Try not to read hate stuff like that. So if you have something more legitimate, I've often recommended to you that the many times that we've had you appear at these forums have recommended various sources for you to go and seek some redress of the problems you have. The last time I think it was that there was a court case you lost and that the judges in the state were in a conspiracy against you. I've also recommended that there are times when it's difficult for people to take something like being told no or being told there's a difficulty in their life. And then I've often recommended to you that you seek someone who would help you get over this obsession you seem to have with losing the court case.
It doesn't have to be the court case I'm talking about now. You didn't hear anything about the court case here.
John, we are restricted to asking questions.
I know.
And you're interrupting me,
having a real problem.
extremely rude, and you let me finish my answer.
I'm being rude now because you were rude to me last time. And what I'm saying is these books right here are talking about major drug problems in this country. And there are major drug problems in the state of Iowa that are bigger than drug problems elsewhere because these people have let it be so. The climate of fear pervades everything. Nebraska is a state of fear. I got this out in Nebraska, and it says, if you can't read it, homosexual prostitution probe ensnares officials of Bush-Reagan White House, call boys given midnight tour of the White House. On the backside, it talks about children being taken off the streets of America. In addition to credit card fraud, the investigation is said to be focused on the illegal interstate prostitution, abduction, and use of minors for sexual perversion, extortions, larceny, and related illicit drug trafficking. Now, when I got this, there's no way I can tell it's the truth, okay? It could be a Xerox thing made up of different headlines, and they could have filled this whole thing in. But I called Paul Rodriguez in the Washington Times. This was run in 1989. And I said, was this the only story, and was this run on the front page the way it indicated? He says it was, and I wrote 60 stories altogether about this. And I'm asking you, if a major paper in Washington, D.C. is running headlines about children who are kidnapped off the streets of America, being prostituted even into the White House, don't you think that if the news media were disseminating information as they normally would, it would be picked up and run across the country? What would have happened with Richard Nixon if the Washington Post had run the Watergate stuff and no other paper had picked up on it at all, and no Associated Press and no one had picked up on what was going on? That is literally what's happening today.
It's very apparent and very obvious that there is a certain degree of cover-up here. And there's an attempt to quash the what little bit of news that has come out and to slant it and taint it by the various major publications in the state of Nebraska. And mainly because, I think, because the prominent people are involved in this.
The Des Moines Register was very concerned about who was going to be delivering the papers, like the next day. And
they told us we had to find a replacement.
We had to find a replacement. Under those situations, I told them where to put the papers.
And the press is...
The press does not want to talk about what's going on. I'm using this means of bringing this information to you because all of the people that I have dealt with in the making of this program have universally said, America is censored. America is under censorship. America is terrorized. by what is going on.
I want to step back and take you back to what happened in Nebraska. We had the Franklin Credit Union. We had the credit union going down. We had people who had money invested in the credit union going to Senator Loren Schmidt, and Loren Schmidt forming the Franklin Committee to investigate what was going on. He was investigating what happened to the money. Why did that credit union fail? He wasn't investigating the prostitution of children. He wasn't investigating satanic activity and so on. But what did he find? As his investigator got into it, he began to bring videotapes, tapes of children who told of the things that went on in the Franklin Credit Union itself. They have a bedroom in it. He said it's probably one of the few savings and loans in the country with its own bedroom. And then more and more information began to come out about Larry King. Larry Lawrence King, a black man who sang the national anthem at the 1984 and 1988 presidential conventions. And I have a picture of him here with Maureen Reagan right next to him. Now that man brought children to the 84 convention and to the 88 convention for the purposes of prostitution. He had a big inaugural ball party in Washington, D.C. and rented a huge house and spent millions of dollars to bring children from Nebraska there as prostitutes. And what happened when all of this came to light? The FBI stepped in and cross-examined every one of the children and told them if they did not recant their testimony, they would be liable to as much as 530 years in prison for perjury. They were grilled for hour on hour. The ones who didn't recant ended up either dead or in jail.
So definitely, in my opinion, a conspiracy here. I have to say there's a conspiracy. If not a direct conspiracy, certainly a loose-knit conspiracy by the mere fact that these kids, if it's true, and I have a tendency to believe it is true, these kids were transported to Los Angeles, where they obtained drugs, where they were involved in ritual ceremonies. They were transported to Washington, D.C., where they claimed they were molested, and there were obviously some top political figures involved in this sort of thing.
Here is a piece of information that came to me in the mail. It came from the investigation by the Franklin Committee of the Nebraska legislature. It was verified in its authenticity by Republican Senator Loren Schmidt of the unicameral of the Nebraska legislature, who verified the truth and authenticity of it. I want to give you a picture of true horror. But children were not merely abused. One victim described an incident at a farm near Elkhorn, Nebraska in 1981 or 82, where a 10-year-old boy was repeatedly sodomized and beaten by older men. He finally lay crying with blood streaming from his rectum. One of the men took up a pitchfork, playfully playing with him at first, but finally sticking one tine into him. While the boy screamed and the other men stood around and laughed, finally the whole pitchfork was stuck through him, killing him. Snuff films were involved as well. Another young boy was taken by someone in the King Circle from Nebraska to another city and forced to perform oral sex on a man. As the abuser reached orgasm, he shot the boy in the head with a pistol, all of which was filmed.
Our private investigation has led us down all of these trails years ago, to the snuff films, to a lot of things. And many of our friends and associates bailed out on us because they didn't want to hear it. It was too horrible to want to be close to either one of us.
Well, the security blanket was rippled, and people, I mean, even when you talk about the police, they don't want to talk about it because that upsets their security in the system. It's just like if somebody found out that a fire department wouldn't come to your house if you had a fire, same kind of deal.
One more thing. This report states it reaches high into Republican Party circles in Washington, D.C. Pedophilia owns this nation. Pedophilia is part of what we're talking about. And the hiding of the pedophiles is being done by none other than the FBI.
It was sometime in August of the year that Johnny was kidnapped when a neighbor lady saw this car sitting there with California plates on it, taking pictures of many different things, but Johnny was on his paper route at the same time, and apparently she was shooting pictures, or, you know, she was pointing the camera at him. Whether she took the picture or not, we presume she was. And the lady called the police department about it. They never, ever checked it out. Then they lost the license plate number. The lady had wrote it down. After this ordeal, she didn't have the license plate number anymore either. And then roughly a month later, on September 5th, 1982, that's when Johnny was kidnapped on his paper route. And the people that were there that morning at the corner said that the only thing they saw in this guy's car was a brown manila envelope laying on the front seat. Whether it was a picture, whether it was a work order to kidnap him, or whatever it was, we presume it was probably both.
Kathleen Sorensen, a mother in Nebraska who took in foster children, was killed in a very bizarre car accident involving a Satanist. She's one of the more than 16 deaths in Nebraska involving a cover-up of the revelation of child prostitution, child slavery, and a nationwide child prostitution and slavery network.
These children from a very young age, and now I need to explain that I am talking about children who came out of birth homes, the family they were born to worshipped the devil. So that's all I can share, and I don't pretend to be an expert. All I have to tell you is what the children have told me. And my husband always says, we know things we shouldn't know. And that's true. And I thought very carefully before I agreed to do this program, because we have heard so much, and it is so ugly and so frightening that you hesitate to tell it to people. It's very heavy to know. I don't want people running around, you know, looking in their closets and not leading normal lives. It is just, you don't want to think that you're giving people ideas. I don't want people to say, if a child begins to talk about some of this, they probably saw it on that show that Kathleen did. I don't want them to say that. That's a danger. But we're hearing more and more. That's right. We're seeing things in the newspapers and magazine articles. We're seeing the major TV news shows and talk shows talking about this. That's right. And it is becoming very, very out in the open. And I think it's time for people to know that this is not fun and games. This is not something that we can laugh at.
That's right.
Or ignore.
And we're not doing it to give the devil a bunch of publicity and let's talk about gory, gooey things, you know, to get everybody all scared. And because these things are happening.
They are happening. And that is a question that comes up often. Well, to talk about the devil, you're going to give him power and honor and glory. And I'm here to tell you this is not to give him honor and glory.
That's right.
The children that I have worked with are getting well, and I believe they will be okay. And when you hear these stories, you're going to wonder, how can that be? They should be locked up in a psych ward someplace. And the world will look at it that way. But these children have been offered the hand of Jesus. It is the only thing, and because of that, I know they will be fine.
Amen.
I believe that. They have all witnessed murders. They have all participated in murders. The children I have talked to have all had to murder before the age of 2. I mentioned that last week, and we kind of went right on past it. That is something that is beyond anything I could comprehend.
Right.
But in some way, whether with the help of an adult's hand over theirs, or by having them practice, by getting them excited to be part of the adult scene. These children have never seen a normal life, for goodness sake. They do murder. And the evil thing that happens is they really believe they want to. They want to do what the older people are doing, and they're praised for that. And that becomes their goal, to be like the adults and to do these horrible things. There is a little part in them that I believe we all have, that natural, good, God-given part that knows it's wrong. But in a group and in the excitement of everything, they want to do that. They enjoy the sex. Children are capable of enjoying the sex. That was something I didn't know. Well, you know, why would they fight against it? A child will eat a bag of candy if you give it to them. They will take part in these things willingly. When they get out and begin to talk, that's very difficult for them to realize. We didn't realize it at first, that they actually wanted to do that, and that is part of the very sophisticated brainwashing job that they do on all of these children. We have recently learned something that we should have figured out early on. They are all made to pray to the devil, to dedicate themselves to the devil. Probably their parents do that in a very sophisticated way early on, and it's a great fear that one of the little children recently said, and I am not the devil's child. I am not. And that's how we got onto that. But it's like they are told they will never get out. Nobody will ever believe them. There is no freedom. The law will get you. I mean, these children are hopeless before they get someone that's willing to listen. They are threatened with death. Every time a child is killed in their group, they are told, if you tell, this will happen to you. They have every reason to believe that. So after they come into the system, and of course, again, these are the ones I'm talking about, and are with another family and begin to feel somewhat safe, they still expect these people to show up on the doorstep. They believe that those people know everything they're saying, who they're talking to, what they're doing. One teenager told me that she had been told if she ever married, that it would fool her because it would be one of them, and she wouldn't know if she was married. So they set them up to fail in every area, and only the power of Jesus can break that, and that's the way we work with them. Where do these things happen? They happen all across the United States of America. We know that there are cases in every state. The 2020 program that was on several years back documented that. They very frequently, most often, do not get to court. And if they do, they're dropped or laughed at because they tear the kids up. I have a cause. These children talk kid talk. They don't talk like we do. And for instance, the ones that had told me that the people at their ceremony wore sloppy clothes, and for the longest time I thought they meant dirty clothes, and found out they were talking robes. You have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to, if you ask a child, and on that day, did you have to drink blood? And they say no. You have to remember that they probably had to drink blood another time. They're not going to come in like we would and say, well, not that day.
Volunteering.
But the next week we had to.
In August of 1984, and it was about 4 days before the Martin boy was kidnapped from Des Moines, I was asked to fly to Washington, D.C. and testify at a Senate hearing. And it was organized crime hearings and their possible connection to kidnap cases. I wasn't asked to come in for all of the missing children hearings, which had been held earlier in the year. But they had me come for this other one, which I thought was kind of strange at the time. But our private detective had been digging up a lot of information showing an overall network in the country, and that Johnny was a possible victim of that network as opposed to just a random pedophile running around Des Moines. So when I presented what we had in our case, the person that followed me in presenting was a member of the FBI, and what they had laid on the table about this size was nothing but one publication after another that had all been taken from a pedophile in a raid that the FBI conducted. One of the things was a book on how to molest small children without leaving marks on them. We're talking toddlers. How to coerce or abduct a child into a car, the how-to books that teach pedophiles to do this, paraphernalia that would be used in some type of sexual torture for children. And then the other interesting thing that was there on the table was a book of pictures of kids who had not yet been kidnapped.
The statement was that you could order a kid out of that book.
And the interesting thing is that from time to time when we do hear of reports of children being photographed either on a playground and or walking to and from school or just whatever, in many cases there is an abduction attempt on the same child up to 3 weeks, a month, or 2 months later.
Did anybody give any indication of how much it cost to buy one? Because what I'm saying is that this is not going to be done cheaply, and it's not going to be done for free.
We've heard estimates of about $50,000 to $75,000 per child, depending on the features and the looks of that child, the innocence, prepubescent children. There are also, and this has been documented by a number of private investigators who've researched it, that periodically auctions take place in the United States. Different places, they move around. They don't just set up shop in one spot and publish a notice that there's going to be an auction. It's done very secretively, and they might run 10 to 20 kids at a time through an auction block. And the buyers can be from foreign countries or whatever. And then the child would never have a hope of ever getting back to his own country.
There are internment camps around the country where they keep these people after they kidnap them. And I've heard of one in Des Moines, Iowa, as a matter of fact. I know of one in West Virginia. I know of one in Nevada near the Arizona border. I know of some in California and also in the state of Washington. And these are well organized. They're camps where they keep the people in cages. And I've been told that they're involved in brainwashing in these particular camps. And many of the victims that are kidnapped end up in these camps.
NAMBLA stands for North American Boy Love Association, and this was brought to our attention. It was acquired through an underground connection, and it was, the date on here is June of 1983, just a few months after Johnny was taken. And on the front page of NAMBLA's bulletin, down at the bottom, they are warning all of their members, of which Iowa has many, all of their members not to in any way comply with the FBI and submit to any kind of questioning on the Johnny Gosch case. And they were very careful to spell it out, Johnny Gosch case. Then this is continued over here on page 3. There's another section about Johnny Gosch. Now, why would a rag like this need to warn their members not to talk about our case unless there's some connection?
This is written to Dr. Judy Ann Denson-Gerber, who, by the way, is on the hit list of the NAMBLA people. I am writing you at present to at the request of an organization that is not interested in advancing the cause of kiddie porn for the sake of the exploitation of children, but rather for the social recognition of children's sexuality, for the acceptance of the sexual expression of adults that desire sexual relations of a loving and tender nature with children, and ultimately for raising human beings without the typical sexual impediments that are so prevalent in our Judeo-Christian society. In other words, if it's good for us, it's good for the nation. Now, I have actual records of a meeting of the Man-Boy Association in 1979. They had $620 in their bank account as of that time. By 1989, they were depositing $5 million in the Franklin Credit Union in Nebraska. What for? To pay for children kidnapped across the country, to pay for taking children out of Boys Town and out of Girls Town to be used for prostitution purposes and porn films. Now, John and Noreen Gosch are well-to-do people, well-together people, and Johnny was their son late in life. So they were able to put a great deal of resources and a great effort into putting information across the country about the kidnapping of Johnny. They said we had to sell candy and have fundraisers and so on to put out all those posters and everything that we put out across the United States. But in 1987, the word came down from on high, from people who were following the Goshes and following the Gosh family, and that was, you shut up right now and say no more about the North American Man-Boy Love Association.
The threats came throughout the year of 1987 and 88. We had a lot of activity on the case. We were moving in a direction where we thought we really were going to close in on the who did it part. So that became a threat to whoever was responsible to want to stop us. And there was harassment that went on towards us that you wouldn't believe. People would come here in the middle of the night and they would throw things at the house to wake us up. And then we would see them out in the backyard, and by the time we could get outside or the police could get here, the people would be gone. The phone call in question came shortly after John and I had made a trip out of state, and it was business on Johnny's case. And we had gotten to this one state, and John said, I don't feel comfortable at this hotel. I don't know why. I just don't want to stay here. So we went up to another hotel and checked in and did our business and came home. We were only gone 3 days. But 2 days later, I got a call. That one came to my office where there were no taping facilities. That call came to my office, and a voice said, it was a male, very gruff voice, and he said, you made it very difficult for us to watch you. You switched hotels on us. He then proceeded to tell us what rental car agency we used, where we went, where we ate. In other words, details enough to prove to us that somebody was looking over our shoulder. And for what reason, we didn't know, other than we might be hitting pay dirt. We might be getting close to something, because that would be an indication we've got to stop these people, we've got to throw the fear of God into them. And then over the period of months, other family members, we received threats on them that if we did not back out of certain aspects of this investigation, that someone else would be hurt. Well, we already knew that they had access to our comings and goings, that this could be very easily done. We would come home different nights, and our porch light would be out. We would always leave that porch light burning. That was kind of a symbol of hope that we started in the beginning of the case.
It wouldn't be burned out, it would be screwed out.
Somebody would actually come up here and remove the bulb, and see, when we would get home, we'd think, oh, the bulb burned out, we need to replace it in the morning. John would go out there, and the whole bulb was gone. I mean, insidious things were going on. We would get a phone call in the middle of the night, and somebody would just do this. Just tap. They'd say nothing. Within 20 minutes, somebody would be in our backyard, throwing stuff at the house, making sure that we knew they were there. The police traced the calls, and they told us that every phone call came from a phone booth within a radius of our home, of a driving time of about 15-20 minutes. And he said, the lieutenant that was in charge of our case said if we knew which phone booth to stake out next, we'd wait there for them, but they use a different one each time. This went on for months.
Underneath the University Street Ridge, right there at the Des Moines River, are all kinds of satanic symbols, symbols for Nazism, and information that says missing children are dead. That's where the Bloods and the Crips and the other drug gangs meet, and the police I talked to said we don't go here after midnight because they've got the full automatic weapons. We don't. I think the legislature ought to walk as a body down the hill past our botanical gardens and right over there and look what's underneath that bridge, because it suggests that there's a subculture hiding here in Des Moines that's ready to take the city over.
Paul Bonacci has a photographic memory. He can remember every date, every place, every person, every scar, and he has identified Johnny Gosh. He helped to kidnap Johnny Gosh. He was only 12 or 13 at the time, and he was taken along. He also identified the fact that in 1987, when Mrs. Gosh was threatened, when they were told their children would be killed if they revealed that they thought the North American Man-Boy Love Association was the kidnapped ring, At that very time, Paul Bonacci was making a pornographic film with Johnny Gosch, who was a slave in a house of prostitution in Colorado.
I'm Judy Ann Denson-Gerber. I am a psychiatrist and a lawyer and have been practicing since 1967. At that time, my major interest was in drug abuse, and I founded the Odyssey House programs across the United States, in Australia, New Zealand, and in Hong Kong. Actually, one of the things since 1985, and I've been retired from the Odyssey programs, except supervising the one in Michigan. As I said earlier, I began to see more and more people that had been ritualistically cult abused. I began to lecture on it, write on it, speak at seminars, etc. Someone who had knew that this was my field and knew that there were implications of ritual and satanic cult abuse in the Nebraska Franklin Credit Union scandal and embezzlement of funds, and that the major witness in that, Paul Bonacci, happened to be a victim himself at a very early age of child molestation, had been a boy prostitute, had been in porn pictures, had also, according to his statements, participated in 5 cult murders, and was a multiple personality, very much like Sybil is the one that I'm sure most people will know, Three Faces of Eve, that because he was a multiple personality, and since I was an expert in disassociation and multiplicity, would I see him for the purposes of whether or not he was credible. So that I, at the request of Senator Lauren Schmidt, who was the head of the Franklin Credit Union Committee investigation for the Senate and Legislature of Nebraska, sent for me. And I went out there in December, which was not very easy. The only time that really fit in with my calendar, actually. I learned a lot about the cold winters out there and the kinds of things that go on.
Now, excuse me for interrupting, but I would make one observation, possibly. Were the roads so horrendous? I noticed in the transcript of the Nebraska legislative testimony that you made that some of the key senators didn't show up, supposedly because of bad weather and other commitments and other things like that. Do you think that that was deliberate as to not wanting to be a part of your testimony, or do you think it was because the weather was so horrendous?
Oh, I don't think the weather was horrendous for anyone who knows the state of Nebraska. I definitely wasn't so. In fact, I drove back and forth several times between Omaha and Lincoln while I was there. I think that the issue of Satanism to most people is something they'd rather not face, and having to listen to an expert explain what the practices were, why what Bonacci said fit exactly into the practices that many of us knew took place in organized anti-Christ sects, and that as a multiple personality he was credible in spite of his mental disorder, that those were the kinds of things they didn't want to hear, and they would have to ask me questions, and then my answers might be difficult to take and justify and deny. Because after I did appear before the committee, I was not asked to file a formal report. There was some scrambling of my actual testimony so that it in and of itself is hard to read and at times doesn't make sense. I did file a report, about an 8-page report, of which there were 2 pages of recommendations, none of which, to the best of my knowledge, have been implemented. So in answer to your question, I think it was very convenient that the weather was inclement, but the weather was not prohibitive. And it becomes more than denial, it becomes then obstructionism. In the Gosch case, and there I can speak from my own personal experience, when interviewing Paul Bonacci, he definitely said that he had seen Gosch, and he had seen Gosch on 2 separate occasions in a child white slave house. He also described that Gosch had an unusual birthmark. This birthmark was not part of the general information. And when he shared that with Mr. Gosch and then eventually with Mrs. Gosch, they said that it had to be their son. Now, this would have been about at least 4 years after the initial kidnapping occurred. To me, the fact that he had seen this young man alive in a child white slave house could describe a physical aspect that was not a usual one, that the parents themselves said that they believed that he had seen their son, definitely deserved to be looked into. I mean, that isn't something you can just turn aside. Interestingly enough, I had a very, what will I say, goose-pimply kind of experience with Benas. And I received a letter from him about a month later from many of his different personalities. They write me separately. And one of them said to me, Dr. Densker, I wasn't totally honest with you. I didn't tell you everything because I had seen you on December 28, 1982 at a rally at the Holiday Inn in New York, and you were pointed out to me by David Thorstad, the head of the North American Man-Boy Love Association, which is called NAMULA, which I have the distinction and honor in my mind to be public enemy #1 of. I do not agree that young boys should be aroused to erection at 6 months of age when they're being diapered by their mothers so that they learn what the, in quotes, equipment is for, end quotes. I just think that this is a travesty, will increase the Oedipal conflict, that this is not something mothers should do. This is not something that should happen to children when they're being diapered. Children should be loved without being sexually approached. But he said to me in 1990 that he had seen me in, actually in 1982 at such and such a place, at such and such a time, and had been told that I was marked to die. And therefore he was afraid of what he could or couldn't tell me and what would happen to me. I went back and checked my diary, and I was exactly where he said I was. Those are the kinds of things that convinced me that there was a great deal in what Benassi was saying in Nebraska that had to be further investigated. And that to bring him up on charges relying for the grand jury when they haven't investigated. I'll give you a perfect example. One of the alleged perpetrators was also told by everyone that he had a large abdominal scar. It would seem to me, I don't think it could be a physician, that if you're told by someone that X has a large abdominal scar and that he is a perpetrator of pedophilia, all you have to do is look at the man's abdomen. If does he or does he not have the scar? No one to this day has ever looked at this person's abdomen, nor has he been willing to show his abdomen. I mean, if I were an innocent person accused of a heinous crime of constantly buying boy prostitutes, I'd sure as shoot be willing to show whether or not I had an appendectomy scar, an abdominal scar, if I didn't have one. It would only be if I had one that I would stay buttoned up.
I come from a family of 9 children. My grandfather, Paul J. Gruber, was in the Secret Service over a 3-decade period. I knew J. Edgar Hoover personally and Melvin Purvis. And the reason I mention that is because part of what the Lord has revealed to me and my part in this entire what they call, quote, investigation, revealed to the public the falsity of what's going on. When I say that, I refer back to my grandfather's comments not even just a little over a year ago before his death at age 87, when he said that J. Edgar Hoover was no more than a pervert, a homosexual. He tried to get the goods on everybody he could in Washington, D.C. And Melvin Purvis was a hired killer, and J. Edgar Hoover tried to fill his bureau with hired killers. Now, if anybody wants to dispute that, just go to your history books. Even in the World Herald recently, they printed the fact that J. Edgar Hoover was a homosexual and that they're trying to take his name off the building in Washington, D.C. right now. Okay? That's a historical. Now, how did I get involved in all this mess? How did I get to know Janet and her lovely future mother-in-law, who I've known for several years, but with different last name. I didn't even know her tie-in with this until I ran into her at the arraignment for Paul and Alicia. Incidentally, when they went to read the charges and ask them how they pleaded, Paul got up there, and Judge Murphy, who I'll refer to later in some of these articles, said, how do you plead, Paul? And he said, well, not guilty. And Judge Murphy says, do you have a lawyer? And he says, no, I don't. Well, the court will appoint you a lawyer, and referred to the county defender. And Paul, is that all right, Paul? And he says, no. He said, why not? He says, well, I don't trust him. And we started snickering. In fact, the news media was snickering in the back of the room. All 3 TV stations as well as the World Herald. They were all snickering. Well, then Alicia gets up there with her lawyer, Mr. Henry Rosenthal, Jr., said, how do you plead? And Rosenthal says, first of all, I'd like to see a list of the indictments against my client. The county attorney assistant was standing there, and he opened up his file. He had nothing there. I'm sorry, I don't have the file. Do you mean to tell me you're going to ask her to plead not guilty, guilty, or no contendus, or whatever they call it, and you don't even have the indictments in front of you? What is going on here? Now, as we walk down the path of history in Nebraska in 1990, we find out that in this case that they can't even type up the information properly for the lawyers to defend their clients. Why do you suppose the trials were rescheduled for March 4th? Because they weren't providing the lawyers with all of the testimony needed to defend the clients. Why? Well, we'll find out when the perjury trials come up. Because in my opinion, there's so much bogus going on in this because of the way law enforcement did not handle the cases. Okay, here we go, down here. We have, title says, Chief, Porn Victims Become Recruiters. It talks about a porn ring in Omaha that the FBI and the Omaha police were investigating, involving 13 Omaha men, and they were using paper boys. Sound familiar? Boys, they preyed upon boys with single parents, where mom was working, couldn't keep tabs on them, no dad around. 2 men mentioned, one of whom was arrested, the other, who split town, has never been heard from since, was a teacher at Westside in Omaha, Nebraska. And these names I bring up is Ben Bruner, age 48, who split town, and there's another one here. Let's see, I can't seem to find it because I didn't get a chance to do all my highlighting. But anyway, both of these men are mentioned in Paul's diary. Now, if Paul made all this up while he was in jail because he heard the stories of Alicia and the other 2 boys on the news media, he would have had to borrow this from me, and I didn't know Paul at the time, and I didn't get a hold of this article until former State Senator Marge Higgins informed me that this article existed, and I had to dig it out of the records at the Omaha Library. So if Paul made all this up, how come he pinpoints 2 guys that end up in a porno investigation 5 years ago? Come on, folks. How naive is the public? How naive are we? He's not making it up. So that's just one for you there. That's one for the road. That gets us warmed up a little bit here. Okay, now, we find out that in the very start of this investigation, the World Herald was doing a fairly credible job of reporting the news. And my hats are off to them for that. However, in the very beginning of this, there wasn't really any mention of sex, porn, or children. It was basically another credit union that fell apart. Then we find out as it begins to get into this fact about these kids, all of a sudden, they yank Mr. Flannery, who's one of their better reporters, James Allen Flannery, who ended up taking a sabbatical to Kansas University for 9 months. Mr. Flannery's doing an excellent job reporting from all that we've obtained on the World Herald's handling of it. And then when it got too close to home, they yanked him and they put Mr. Robert Dorr, who is a very loyal World Herald reporter, very loyal to Harold Anderson. And from then on, it was Robert Dorr and Gabriella Stern. Now, Gabrielle, she lost her, she got reassigned, folks, after her comments to John DeCamp and some other members there at the state legislature, and several people overheard her, that she says, well, we can't report on the little fags because then it would expose the big fags. Now, what was she talking about? And there's enough people to prove that she said that, folks. She didn't, it wasn't made up. She said that. And ever since then, somebody said to me at the time, they said, oh my gosh, they're going to fire her now. I said, no, they're not. And they said, what do you mean? Well, if you know anything about business, if they fire her, they'll be admitting she's telling the truth. So you reassign her. You make life miserable for her, and she gets a job at another paper. And they said, oh, you're right. I said, well, these people aren't stupid. They haven't made too many mistakes along the way in trying to cover themselves up, other than leaving hundreds of victims behind and broken lives of children who they just terrorize then and terrorize their families. So they're not going to fire her. Anyway, so we get into here and we find out that the Franklin case is talking about. Oh, we find out that the abuse starts coming in. This is in, let's see, December 18th of 1988. And they're talking about the abuse and the frantic months at Franklin. And that's pretty good. That's not too bad. And then the child abuse starts coming out. By the way, we got a lot more than this. I just printed up the stuff that I would refer to in my speech today. We have about 1,000 articles. Not just World Herald, but Kansas City Star, other newspapers, Lincoln Journal-Star, covering this. We find out that people in other towns seem to know more about Franklin than we do. I wonder why that is. You know, if we use logic, God created logic. Logic always leads us to the right, to being able to figure out right and wrong, if we follow logic. You know, and they talk about Satanism. People don't want to hear it. Even Christians don't want to hear it. Well, let me tell you, let me make this point. You don't have to believe in the devil if you don't want to. That's your own choice. And you don't have to believe in a figurative devil if you don't want to. But Satanists believe in the devil. And you got to realize that it's a religion. And they believe in it, and they follow that doctrine. And whether you want to accept it or not, it's real. It's real to them. And they kill. Satanists kill.
First of all, I want to thank all of you on behalf of the children, as I said in my prayers this morning, that cannot speak for themselves, and adults such as myself that have been there, that not because they're cowards, but because of the non-receptive attitudes of society. My father brought people involved in the cult into this. And I can remember, I can remember even at 3 years old, there were like three men and one woman. They used to stand over me. They were dressed in black capes, some kind of leather stuff on them, black hoods. And these hoods had horns on the mask over their hoods. They were a part of what my sisters and brothers and I was put through. You wonder where my mother was. My mother was also a victim of it. You know, I forgave my father and the other perpetrators and stuff years ago. But see, he not only got to us, he got to 7 out of 11 of his own nieces and nephews. Not my 2. I wouldn't let him near with a 10-foot pole. He's had me committed to jail, to psychiatric wards and everything else because I wouldn't let him even around my daughter for a minute. We grew up. People telling us it's too bad that such a wonderful person has to have such a lousy family. He was a pillar of the community. Reach out and love. My dad come home and he says he saw the puppy and he said, "You can't have that." And I said, "No, I begged him." And he said, "No." He said, "It's going to be gone." I got up the next morning. I went outside, and on our trash can was that little black puppy where he had mutilated. He had skinned the hide right off the side of one side, but on the other side he left it was laying on its left side. He had left the fur on it and put an upside down cross.
Naylor, who was former counsel for the Legislative Probe before John Stevens Berry, in July 15, 1989, says that only the State Patrol was thorough in the initial probe of the Franklin investigation. So he comes out and says, according to what the Franklin Committee investigated, that the State Patrol's the only ones that investigated fully, which meant the FBI and the Omaha Police did not. So that's in print. And I'd like to look Officer Charles Phillips in the eye, who was the one that wrote up the phony baloney subpoena on Alicia Owen to put together an illegal blood test using 2 statutes in Nebraska law that did not apply, and waited and had Judge Murphy sign it. You know, that was my first question. Why did Judge Murphy sign the subpoena for an illegal blood test on a victim witness when Judge Buckley was the presiding judge? Well, my sources down at the county courthouse tell me that Judge Murphy's the next in line when Buckley's not there to sign it. So legally, the only way for him to sign it is Judge Buckley went home. Oh, you mean so am I to say that they waited till Buckley went home for the Memorial Day weekend in 1990 and then had Murphy sign the subpoena so they could wait until 8 o'clock at night to try and pick a little girl up, and then they lied to Senator Schmidt and said, no, we tried to pick her up at 3 o'clock that afternoon, and then there was such a flood of calls because there was so much evidence that they waited till 8 p.m.
Now you have a yellow sheet of paper. On that yellow sheet of paper is an address for Alicia Owens. It's in York, Nebraska. She's in the Women's Penitentiary in York, Nebraska. She's now 21, maybe going on 22 years old. She's been in solitary confinement longer than any other woman in Nebraska history. What she did was talk to the Nebraska legislature, talk to the Franklin Committee, and tell them what had happened to her from the age of 12. The FBI warned her she'd spend a long time in prison if she didn't recant. She's a born-again Christian. She's been in solitary confinement with nothing to read but her Bible. And they thought, we're going to break this lady, we're going to break this girl. And she said, not till I die will I give up, will I recant my story. And there are a group of people in Nebraska called the Nebraska Leadership Council. And they're working now with a petition, and I'm supposed to have a copy of that petition soon sent to me. And in that petition, they're going to ask for her unconditional release. Now, what I'm saying to you is Alicia Owens is America's youngest political prisoner.
Who put her there? The FBI and others. Why? Because one of the things she said was, I saw a vice president, then a president, at these parties in Washington, D.C. Now, Judy Ann Denson Gerber confirms this. She's a friend of a president. She grew up with him, and she says, I am rethinking my relationship to him because of what I now know is going on. And I was told, don't mention names. So I'm going to say to you, in this state, I feel that everyone from the governor on down should be voted out of office. In the state of Nebraska, I feel the same thing. In the U.S. Congress, I feel the same thing. Now, I have gone to congressmen, first with the story of drug trafficking in Iowa, and I received from a senator, Iowa drug-free by '93. And I had local law enforcement officials willing to go to Washington, D.C. and testify to the takeover of whole Iowa counties in the drug trafficking business. Now, that senator refused everything that I wanted to give him, refused to reply to me in any way, and I later confronted him on video and once again changed the subject and wouldn't deal with this, was given information on the Franklin Committee and wouldn't deal with that.
I'm not certain I can answer your second question. I know about the Christie Institute and some of their investigations, and quite frankly, they have done some good, I think, in bringing this to the public light. Beyond that, I really don't have enough knowledge to comment on.
Good.
Hello there.
Hello. Are you familiar with the Franklin Committee from Nebraska?
No.
Investigations of pedophilia in the Republican Party by Senator Lawrence Schmidt?
No, I'm not, because you're talking about legislative stuff, right?
No, I'm talking about high-ranking Republican officials being involved in actual pedophilia.